Now, I've got some notation for this. I'm often going to talk about these triads, and I'm going to want to label, the same way I labeled triads to tell what the root is using Roman numerals, I'm also going to want an easy notational system so that you can look right away at a label and know which inversion. And instead of writing out root position, second inversion, I'm going to use a numerical shorthand for that called figured base. And figured base works very similarly. It works kind of on the same principle of caring what the lowest note is and then not really caring about specifically what other notes we've got. Let me show you what it's based on. Most originally, it's based on a practice from Baroque music in which you just write out a bass line and you write a bunch of numbers. And those numbers just tell you which notes to play. And sometimes those notes make a triad and sometimes they don't. So for example, if I wrote that, that would say stick a fifth above and stick a fourth above in some register. So that's a C and a D. I could make it a perfect fifth. Here, I'll write it in this register. I could make it a perfect fifth. I'll add another G just for good fun. I'll put my C up there. Now remember, the C is the fourth above, and the fourth was the lower number. The D is the fifth above. It was written above, but in fact, the C is above the D. None of that matters. When I'm doing figured bass, the highest number goes on top, unless there's something about the stream of numbers which forces me into something else. But in general, all things being equal, I'm just going to write the highest number on top. And it doesn't matter. It's not saying exactly a fifth. It's saying a fifth or a compound fifth. It's not saying exactly a fourth. It's saying a fourth or a compound fourth. And there could be multiple of them. I could double it. I could add a. I'm still following the instructions in this figured bass. There could be multiple, and there's nothing to say that the D is above the C. The C can be above the D. That tells me that above this G, well, I wouldn't actually double the C. That would be kind of horrible. Would probably do that in a tonal context. But all that matters for our purposes is that this is not a triad. This is not a triad at all. There's no way to stack up these notes and make them into a root, third, and a fifth by putting one of them on the bottom and switching registers. This is not a triad, but this is a perfectly good use of figured bass. Remember that this kind of thing exists. You'll see it every once in a while in the homework as things get a little bit more advanced. For our purposes, though, you want to understand just that concept of writing numbers. So if you think of this as the bass number, as the bass note, what are your intervals above the bass? 5 and 3. What are your intervals above the bass? 6 and 3. Again, intervals 6 and 4. Okay? So those figured bass numbers come to stand in for inversions because they're saying basically the same thing. So because I don't care about, so long as I've got some fifth and third. So here I've written, if I write 5, 3, I've got actually two of the bass note. Any of these notes can be added to. A third above that, well, not a third down there, it's all the way up at the top. A fifth, not a fifth there, a fifth up there in the middle. And the fifth, 5 above 3, but in fact the third's above the fifth. That's a root position triad, as is, that, as is. Those are all equally examples of root position triads. And in a complete figured bass, you'd write out 5, 3. Similarly, so long as the third of the chord is in the bass, it really doesn't matter how the other notes are distributed. Or not. It doesn't matter how the other notes are distributed. These are the notes of the C major triad in some configuration. 6-3 is telling me that it's in first inversion. I better put the third of the chord in the bass. These are both equally 6-3 chords, similarly 6-4 chords. Second inversion. Now, In actual, if you're asked in an assignment to write out full figured bass numbers, this is always what you should do, 5, 3, 6, 3, 6, 4. But these tend to be abbreviated. 5, 3 is abbreviated as nothing because root position chords are the most common. 6, 3 is abbreviated simply as 6, and 6, 4 you always write out in full. So if I were, I'll just add a 6, 4 here. If I were actually labeling these, I'd erase all the 5, 3s. I wouldn't bother with this. That would be just 6. That would be 6, 4. And these are used in conjunction with Roman numerals. So this would be just a 1. And here, let me use some other inversions so things are a little bit more interesting. So you see, I'll use the subscript number. Some people may use superscript. I use subscript. Roman numeral tells me that the root of the chord, F, is scale degree 4. It's a major triad because it's an uppercase letter. And this 6 subscript figured bass tells me that the third of the chord is in the bass. The third of the chord is the lowest sounding note. So what this does, this little symbol gives you a tremendous amount of information about this chord right there. It's a very compact and efficient way of representing that. The one other thing that I want to tell you about inversions is that it may seem like inversions are sort of a detail. Oh, triads are triads, and you can put whatever note in the bass. Inversions make a huge difference, and let me show you something about that. Here's this little chord progression I've been playing sometimes. 1, 4, 5, 1. 1, 4, 5, 1, all in root position. Now let me just switch them to all first inversion. It's still, so this sounds like this. Okay, it still makes sense as music, basically, although it's kind of unstable, it's a little weird. Now let me put them all in second inversion. Now it makes no sense whatsoever. Let me play that again. That simply bears no relationship, no meaningful relationship to the root position case. So there's root position, here's first inversion. Okay, a little unusual. Now, music from Mars. It just doesn't make sense. It's completely incoherent by the standards of traditional Western tonal music. So be aware, these inversions really make a big difference. And when we learn how to use each of these triads, learning how to use, that we talked about last time, learning how to use each of the inversions is going to be a big part of that.